Saludos everybody, welcome back to Decent Shirt, where we play cards while we wear decent shirts. And for today's video, we are back with more reveals for the newest set of ELESTRALS Firestorm. And this set has been steaming with new cards that I just can't wait to discuss with you guys, so let's get on to the video. Alrighty then, so starting off with the first newest card that was revealed for the Hermes camp was Caduceus of Hermes. I'm not sure if that's how you spell it, how you pronounce it, but regardless, one of the big things about this is that we're getting new artifacts that are now one cost, which makes this a lot more viable because artifacts used to be too expensive for what it was worth. It used to be like um, the only good artifact used to be just Trina Poseidon because you could lock your opponents from their using their counter runes. However, at this point, we've learned that it's probably too expensive. That we do need like a better balancing of costs, and it seems like the team in the Celestials staff has been hearing our thoughts and prayers, and finally are giving us a lot of different one cost artifacts, which I think should have been from the start how it should have gone. But regardless, here we are. It does have a very interesting effect. When the Empower Celestial is destroyed in battle, you can target one spirit wind Celestial in your underworld and special cast it. This has a lot of synergy with cards like Hydrake, which your opponent is going to look for other resources or other ways to get rid of your Hydrakes outside of battle. So this would allow you to basically return that Hydrake if it ever got destroyed in battle, or if you enchanted to Hydrake, you could go for really silly plays where Hydrake crashes into something and you get to special cast with the twin draw with the Hydrake, but at the same time you also get to revive the Hydrake. So it's really interesting. I think there's a lot of cool ideas behind this card, and I'm excited to see where those ideas might go. Another key thing that we should have to highlight is the fact that the Empower Celestial does not have to be wind. I think that for many people, their first impression is going to think that there has to be a wind celestial that has to be empowered. However, that is not the case. It can be any color, so you could, in theory, use this to revive said Hydrake back very easily. The last card that I think is really good, that could work with this card is actually the newest Champion of Hermes Exalter. Champion of Hermes Exalter says that while Hermes is in play, you get a +3 attack, so it becomes a 6 attack on a 1 cost. However, it does have another effect that before we didn't think would be too appropriate, but now we see the kind of synergies that it has, which says that if it was special casted from the underworld, it is immune to battle destruction during that turn that it was casted. So Caduceus of Hermes has some really cool ideas behind it, because you could, in theory, right, special cast a Exalter from your underworld with this effect, and now you have a 3 or 6 attack if you have the Hermes that would also be immune to battle destruction. So lots of stuff to think about there. Overall, a very exciting card. I'm excited to play with this card. It's gonna be very fun. All right, so we do have another artifact for Hermes. Very interesting that we got 2 for 1. The Talaria of Hermes is a 2 cost. Going back to 2 cost artifacts, I think that's too expensive. Let's see if this effect is able to pull through, even though it is a very expensive effect. It says the Empower Celestial gets +2 defense. Nothing to write home about. We have effects that even give you 3 defense, so alas, not that great. However, when the Empower Celestial is destroyed in battle, you can draw 2 cards. Then, if Hermes is enchanted, you can search your deck for either a second copy of Stellaria of Hermes or a Caduceus of Hermes and add it to your hand. So this is like a 1 for 3 cards, basically. I think this would be a lot better if it just was one cost, but since it is two costs, I think it's a little bit too expensive, even though you are drawing. At this point, if you want to use it as a draw engine, I would prefer you just playing Nog over Talaria Fermis. Even adding the second Talaria Fermis, like a Nog that searches another Nog, while in theory sounds really good, in practice, it has to be destroyed by battle. It doesn't have it doesn't proc its effect when it's by an effect destruction, so that severely limits the way or the amounts of situations where Talaria Fermis would actually be better over Nog, and two defense is not really gonna cut it. So even though it has a really cool draw effect, ultimately I think it will not really see that much play. And I would love to see me be proven wrong. So who knows? That being said, I think the most exciting out of the Hermes cards that were revealed during this week was actually Carrion. Carrion, Champion of Hermes, has 3 attack and 1 defense. You know, decent but not great stats. But what is important is not actually stats, but rather its ability. When this Carrion is sent to from your deck to the underworld with your Hermes effect, you can special cast it from your underworld using a Wind Spirit from either your Spirit deck or your underworld. That means that your Carrion is essentially a free special cast when you use it with the Hermes effect. So you have a way to special cast a free card that can then be used for anything else with Wind. Um, the first thought that comes to mind is that you can use it for ascension lines, right? You ascend over the Carrion because it doesn't use your normal cast for turn. Um, but it does have some unique utility that I'm sure will be explored as the meta arrives with Firestorm and we see more cards experimenting with this card. The idea that you just get a free body on board is always strong in this game, especially a free body. Like, this is the closest that we have to a free body on board. And overall, I'm excited. I think this card will be great in Win decks. I think that it will also serve as the newest favorite card for Antitan users because Antitan is always searching for ways to use their own insectoids, and now you have a searchable insectoid that can be special cast to the field basically for free, which can enable both Arbod and Arvarum's effects. So I'm looking forward to this. I think this card is really good. Probably the best Hermes cards, unless we see something that goes over that. I can see a world where we get more special cast from the underworld with Hermes effects, but at the end of the day, this card is going to be really good, and I think a lot of decks are going to be using it if they play Hermes. One last thing, the fact that we now get untitled Carrion means that we can now play 6 Carrions in a deck, and if you were really interested in building a carry-off deck where you could steal your opponent's Elestrals and being able to special cast it from your hand if it was ever destroyed, well, now you have, right, a new way of both using it to ascend quicker to the carry-off and also at the same time being able to have more outs to that carry-off effect. Overall, very strong card. If I were giving ratings, this would be a 5 out of 5 card in my opinion. Alright, now moving away from the Hermes cards, we now go to the Poseidon cards, which are also very, very exciting. The first one being Sluggle, the mascot of our channel, and boy oh boy did we get a buff to Sluggle. Like, we are eating very nicely today. Sluggle, Champion of Poseidon, has the effect that when this Sluggle receives 1 or more water or less spirits from your Poseidon's effect, you can special ascend this Sluggle to Globby from your hand or deck. So we will go into more detail as to why this effect is so strong. Its stats are not really worth mentioning, but essentially this makes Globby from base set playable. This Sluggle makes it so that Globby can now enter to the field, right? Or be casted with 3 spirits on it. Because Sluggle would be able to be cast, then you would Nexus from the Poseidon to the Sluggle, and there you would get its effect. Therefore, you would be able to ascend to Glavi, which would then have the effect to be able to ascend into Majesea. This means that this is probably going to be the definitive sluggo for any Majesea strategy moving forward. Any new Majeseas that we get from here on out is probably going to be using sluggo, because it is a 2 card combo essentially. You cast, if you have Poseidon and you have your sluggo, you essentially have your combo set for your Majesea. Um, Overall, I'm really happy that it makes basic Glavi relevant now, because basic Glavi was really good. It's just that the Majesea really didn't live up to the potential that it could have had. But now we do have 2 new Elestrals from that line, which are going to shake things up. That first one being the new Glavi Champion of Poseidon. Now, this one is not going to see a lot of play in Champions of Poseidon decks, in my opinion, even though it does have the title. Uh, I think it will be its own deck rather than being used with Majesea, especially because when you cast Glavi, whether that is from normal Ascension, Special Ascension, or special cast from anywhere on the field, or from anywhere on your deck or your hand or under whatever it is, you can search your deck for an Atlantis or Rise from the depths and add it to your hand. So this is an instant searcher on cast that makes it has basically 2 possible effects. You either are gonna get a 2-drop with 7 attack, which makes this a lot more respectable for a 2 cost, or it also searches for Rise from the Ashes with the ability to be able to then go wide on your Elestral's board and be able to threaten your opponent with a more of, let's say, aggressive lineup. Overall, I think that Glavi is a really good card. I don't know if we will see that much play unless we get really solid support for Wexus. If we see more water support in this set, I do think that Glavi has a really nice shot of being seeing some kind of play, because it does have a really strong effect. It's just a matter of, does it have a home for it to be used? Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room for the water cards, and that is the newest Majesea. We're getting a new Majesea, and this Majesea is pretty insane, if I have to say so. Insane but not broken. It is tied down by the fact that its stats are not the greatest. It does have 6 attack and 14 defense. 14 defense is a lot more respectable. However, 6 on a 3 cost is kind of like very underwhelming, to be fair. If you pair it up with something with Atlantis, then it would probably be much more worth it. However, right now, standalone, just looking at Majesea with just its base stats, it is a little bit hard to sell the card. That being said, it does make up for its lackluster stats with an insane effect that we've never seen before. That being that while Poseidon is enchanted, and this Majesea is an attack position, so it does have 2 requirements. Poseidon does have to be enchanted, and you do have to have it in attack position, which is horrible considering that Majesea has only 6 attack. But if it does fulfill both of those requirements, the spirits enchanting Elestrals are water instead of their original element. That means for everybody on board, not just yours, but also your opponents. This is stupid strong. This is one of the biggest floodgates that we've ever seen so far in the game, because it basically neutralizes any effect on your opponent's side for the Elestrals, right? As far as the Elestrals are concerned, they're not going to have any effects. They're just going to be vanilla bodies on the board while Majesea is in play with Poseidon. So that is very strong, because many decks rely on their abilities to be able to play the game, right? Like, that's nothing new. Like, the closest that we got was 5s that really didn't care that much about their abilities, but even then, the cards that are played in 5s do want to abuse their abilities, and if they're negated, that means that Something like Viserys, it's just going to be a 4 attack. Something like a Specteris, it's just going to be a 4 attack that will not be able to neutralize the Majesea, even if it declares an attack, because it will be water enchanted. So, essentially, this is a really strong effect, especially in the early game. I think that there's definitely going to be a lot of people that are going to experiment trying to turbo out Majesea turn 1 and hope that that is enough. And in some instances, that will be enough. However, the 6 attack makes it a lot more manageable. Um, Overall, it's not going to be like so oppressive, in my opinion, that it's going to overtake the meta. I do think that overall, it strikes a nice balance between being a very powerful floodgate and also being outable. Um, it does not turn runes enchantments into water, so it's only Celestial. So you can play Earthquake against it. That's really good. Because we do need outs to this because it could be a problem otherwise. However, that's not the only effect that Majesea has. If it is found in defense position, it does have a nice healing effect. You can return up to 2 water spirits from your underworld to your spirit deck if Majesea is in defense. So one of the things that I like about Majesea in general is the fact that it basically is a counter to most of the water cards that we're seeing being used in decks around water. What do I mean? Galaxy doesn't want to come out against this card because it will then switch its attack to defense, and therefore Majesea will have 14 attack. That's not something they want to do. Eddy, well, if they do Eddy against Majesea, there are some scenarios where I can see it being to the opponent's benefit, right? Like if you're having it in defense because you know your opponent has a 7 attack or higher, a Celestial that can out your Majesea in attack position, sure, Eddy can work like that. However, the fact that Majesea has 6 attack and 14 defense means that if they ever want to use the Eddy is not going to be very useful because it just will turn Majesea into defense. And in fact, that will also help Majesea due to the fact that it will be able to heal the next turn. Obviously, it would turn off the negation of or the floodgate effect. However, if they're using their Eddy to do that, they're more likely not going to be able to use their effects on the Elestrals because they're probably going to use their normal cast. So overall, a very solid card. This is going to be accessible in a starter deck, which is insane. The whole family line is going to be very accessible. You do not have to be opening packs trying to get it if you don't want to go the very high cost route of getting all the higher rarities. And overall, I think it's going to be a very good card. I just think that the low attack might be too much for it. Now, we did get one more water or Poseidon card, and that is Poseidon's Fury. Poseidon's Fury is a very interesting card. I know that I say that a lot about all the cards, but truthfully, every single set that Dan throws at us, right, they come up with really cool ways of playing the game. And this is one of the more interesting removal cards that we've gotten so far. It says basically that you can disenchant any water spirit from one or more of your Poseidon, and your opponent has to disenchant the equal amount of spirits that you discarded or that you're disenchanted. This is really cool because you are basically able to break the board if you are set up with Poseidons, and sometimes you don't even have to pay the exact amount if you know that your opponent only has Elestrals. And let's say they had a 3 cost and they only have 3 spirits under that Pantera, let's say. If you cast Poseidon's Fury and you disenchant just 1 out of your Poseidon, and that's the only Celestial that they have in play and the only card that have spirits enchanted at that moment, with just disenchanting 1, it is able to destroy the Pantera as well. You don't have to disenchant 3. You don't have to go toe to toe. You just gotta do enough so that your opponent has to disenchant more than the cost, so that they have to end up destroying their cards in the long run. So overall, I think this is a really cool card. It is really nice for Wexes, in my opinion, because they're gonna want to use Poseidon now, especially in 3s, and they love to Nexus. So even if Poseidon uses some of their spirits, they can probably return them back with other means. Overall, I'm excited to see Poseidon now actually be playable, actually be viable in a deck, because back then even Wexus didn't really want to play Poseidon. So, super excited for this card. I think it will be strong, but it is very unlikely that you will see it be procced multiple times in a single game. So, it is balanced in that way. Now, moving away from Poseidon, we now go into the new Thunder support with the Champions of Zeus. And Elshik is probably, out of all the cards that were revealed, the worst card, but that does not mean that it's a bad card. Elchik does have 3 attack and 1 defense, so it's kind of underwhelming in the stat department. However, when Elchik declares an attack, you can give it +1 attack for each Thunder, enchanting each Zeus on the field until the end of the turn, right? Which that would mean that Elchik, if you had a full Zeus with 4 spirits under it, that would turn Elchik into a 7 attack. Very emblematic of the Elchik that we had in the past, right? With Zeus and Elchik. The only downside of this is the fact that you only get it when you declare an attack, not when it's in battle phase. So that means that Elchik would die if they declare an attack, because you would not get that stat buff. That being said, as a 1 cost that can swing hard and it can be able to out something that your opponent might have, I think it's really solid. I do think that it's gonna be better due to the other cards that were revealed that help this card feel a lot stronger than what it actually is. Because in a vacuum, Elchik doesn't seem that great. It seems kind of underwhelming. It seems even worse than something like a Tectorus or Volcaris that have a passive but permanent effect. That being said, it being able to be searched by Zeus's Call is also really strong. We're going to discuss that card. And I do expect it to see some play in Thunder decks. I just think that it's a little bit too reliant on Zeus, so I don't think it's going to be a necessary 3-off in most Thunder decks. That being said, I think this is arguably the strongest card for Thunder support that was revealed, and that is Griffuse, Champion of Zeus. Now, its stats don't really seem that strong, 6 attack, 2 defense. However, its effect is where it really shines, because this Griffuse in your hand can special ascend from your Champion of Zeus, but it cannot be misenchanted, right, this way. This is really strong because if we already thought that Cryovern was really strong and Like a Void was strong because you were able to essentially cast it out very easily, now Griffuse can do it from any Champion of Zeus, not just one particular, right? Cryovern needs Cryoling. Like a Void more often than not needs the Werpa. Dracoray needs the Cockaray. Like, you need specific Celestials to enable this second ascension, and that's where you would have to play the line of, is it worth it to run that many copies because you don't want to brick. However, Griffuse does not operate in the same way. Griffuse, Champion of Zeus, can be played with any Champion of Zeus, and that is a very scary effect, because that means that any other Champion of Zeus that we get is just going to be stronger, thanks to the fact that you can always ascend into the Griffuse regardless of. So that is, again, a very scary effect, and it doesn't end there, because when you cast this Griffuse, you can give all your opponent's Celestials -3 until the next turn. That is a Zeus on steroids. Not only are you able to cast it out basically for free or like easily, but also you're giving -3 to all of your opponent's Celestials on the turn that it's cast. Not only is that making Griffuse essentially a 9 attack on cast, it is also creating it so that all your opponent's Celestials are getting -3. So if you had other Celestials on your board, they're more often gonna be able to likely destroy and wipe out your opponent's board because of how strong this effect is, right? I think this is arguably the strongest card. It's going to be a card that can deal with so many threats in the game. And as if it wasn't bad enough of how strong these effects are, it is searchable through Zeus's Call, which again we will discuss very soon. but in general, it's going to be a very intimidating card. It's going to be a card that you are always going to have to think about. Like, does he have it in hand? Do I want to overcommit? Is he going to wipe out my board this turn? That's the type of things that makes Elishik a lot better, because it doesn't even have to use his first attack. It can just use the fact that it's a champion of Zeus to just ascend to Griffuse. So again, very, very strong card, and I think this is going to propel Thunder to be one of the top contender decks in the format. Maybe even the best deck. Now, we cannot forget about the good old daddy, the boss monster himself, Boltempus. And Boltempus, champion of Zeus, is also very strong. It is searchable with Zeus's Call. Again, we'll discuss. It has 14 attack and 7 defense, which on a 3-drop as a boss monster are excellent stats to have. And it does have a very interesting effect that has some big implications for Thunder in the future. So, when your champion of Zeus is destroyed in battle, you can special cast this Boltempus from your hand with Thunder, Wind, if your Zeus is enchanted and you control no Elestral. So basically, this is, if you're familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh, this is the equivalent of a Gorse in most, like, not exactly 100% like that, but it's the most equivalent that we have currently in the game. If your opponent wants to excel and destroy one of your champions of Zeus, they're gonna have to consider the fact that you might have Boltempus in your hand. You might be able to special cast an Elestral of 14 attack body on the board and punish them being able to destroy your Elestral in battle. That means that Elishik, which again we thought, okay, so in a vacuum this is decent but not great because your opponent can always beat over it. Not anymore, because if you have the Boltempus in hand, you can comfortably go and extend with the Elishik, and if they want to get over it through battle, and they do, and you have Boltempus in hand and Zeus in play, then essentially you are guaranteeing casting out your big daddy in one turn. Like, I can foresee very easily having a turn 1 where you have Zeus, you have Elishik, or any champion of Zeus for that matter, and a Zeus's Call or Boltempus. Zeus's Call we'll discuss, but basically it will get you the Boltempus. And being said, like, are you going to out this war? Are you going to have to use that Cryoblast that you would like to use on something else, on my Elishik, because you do not want to deal with my Boltempus? Again, this is a scary effect, not because it's OP, but rather because of the implications of the effect in general. At the end of the day, it will just become a body on the board once it's casted, but that can be enough. There are many decks that struggle a lot to deal with 3 draws because their stats tend to be so high that they don't have a way to out that. One last thing I do want to point out is the fact that this card, in theory, could find a home in base set Boltempus decks. Why? Because if you cast out Boltempus through its method, through the Champion of Zeus effect, then, and if you have the other Boltempus, the base set Boltempus, you can just ascend over it. It becomes a 4-cost, but again, it's a way to cheat out that Boltempus rather quickly. Might be a little bit too clunky, but I thought it was noteworthy to at least mention it. Now, the last new Zeus card that we got was Zeus's Call, which I've mentioned more than 5 times already in this video, and it's for good reason. It is a conditional card. It does need Zeus to be enchanted. However, if it is enchanted, you are able to search for any champion of Zeus and add it to your hand. It does not check for cost requirement. It does not check for element. So if we were ever going to get a Zeus's champion, a champion of Zeus, that was not a Thunder Celestial, you would still be able to search it. And it's on a 1-cost. It's a 1-cost invoke search card. How often do you get of those? The last one that we got was No Stone on turn, and that's a 2 cost. So the fact that we're able to have this on a 1 cost makes Thunder just super consistent, super energy efficient. And I already told you the multiple ways that Zeus's Skull can be very devastating and very scary. The fact that it can search out your Voltempest, it could even search out your Griffuse to be able to do this super aggro wide play where you lower your opponent's Celestials all -3. So it is very versatile. I think it's gonna be a mandatory 3 of in any Champion of Zeus deck, and it makes Thunder decks very scary because if they were already known for being very consistent due to their Ash Rabbit abusability, now Zeus's Skull just makes them even more scary. Now, moving away from Zeus, we do get new cards for Artemis, and we got a Werepup, which honestly, compared to all the other cards that we mentioned so far, I think this one is probably the worst. I think it has a handy effect, but in reality, it's not that great of a card. It has 3 attack, 2 defense, so the stats are not that great. If it were at least a 3/3, then I think it would be a little bit better. But maybe that is enough. Maybe just having another Werepup is enough, and I'll explain why. First, let's discuss the effect. You can special ascend this Werepup to Lycovoid from your hand or deck if an opponent has at least 2 suppressed cards. So you get another way of basically ascending into Lycovoid. That's okay. I think this is a harder condition to meet than the lunar phase and full moon, but alas, having another way to ascend to Lycovoid, not too shabby. Makes Dense Fog a little bit more viable and such. However, when this Werepup is destroyed in battle, you can suppress a card on your opponent's field until the next turn. This is not great. If it had at least the caveat of being like the Artemis effect, where you have that Celestial suppress until the end of your turn, then it would be better. But since it's only in the turn that it's destroyed, that limits how effective the combos that you want to do with suppression are going to be, because once you enter a battle phase, you're not going to be able to cast any other Celestial or Rune for that matter. So overall, not that great of a card, but we did get another Werepup, which means that we now have 6 Werepups in possibility to be used in a deck. And while this is a worse way to ascend into Lycovoid, it does work somewhat well with the new Lycovoid Champion of Artemis, which is going to be a lot more interesting. Champion of Artemis Lycovoid has 6 attack, 5 defense. Those are pretty solid stats for a 2-drop, mainly because you got 5 defense. The 6 attack is kind of underwhelming, but we do make up for it in other ways. When you cast this Lycovoid, you can special cast any number of Werepup from your deck with Lunar Spirits suppress. That is really strong because you are basically filling out your board the moment that Lycovoid is cast. It does not specify that it has to be special ascended. It does not specify that it has to be ascended. It's just when it's cast. So if you revive it from the underworld, you get its effect. If you cast it normally, you get its effect. If you find the Werepup that searches the lunar phase full moon and then you use it to special cast Lycovoid, you can also use that effect. So overall, this already by itself is really strong, but we do get an additional niche effect, but still pretty good. You can destroy a suppressed celestial on your field, and if you do destroy a suppressed celestial on your opponent's field, not the greatest way of removal, but just having any form of removal after being able to special cast so many celestials makes this really good. I think that while it is conditional, it is still worth exploring because you do already cast your own suppressed celestials. So you just have to take care of being able to suppress your opponent's celestials, which you can just easily do once you have your own Artemis in play. Or if you have Dense Fog, obviously. Overall, I think this card is really strong. I think it will see some play. maybe in aggro decks, lunar aggro decks, might want to play this just for the sheer fact that it's going to be able to help you extend very. It's gonna help you extend a lot in one single turn because you're gonna be able to dish out a lot of damage. And the other aspect of this card that I really like is the fact that it's gonna be great for Lunar Ascension decks. If you like Postamus, if you like Farraguys, those decks struggle a little bit to be able to be cast. But with this card, not only are you casting a 2 cost, so that means that you can just ascend over, set like a void, but you're casting out so many Werepups that it's gonna be hard for your opponent unless they already have a setup board. It's gonna be very hard for them to be able to out all of these cards. In which case, that means that probably 1 or 2 Werepups are going to stay on the field by the end of your opponent's turn, which means you can just siphon and ascend into a 3-drop if you already have it in hand. So again, I think this is a really strong card. I think it's kind of underrated, but it will see its use, and I have a lot of faith in this card. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, we do have more we do have more Artemis cards. We do have Panelist Champions of Artemis that has 4 attack and 1 defense. That is pretty solid on a 1 cost. And when 1 or more Celestials become suppressed, or when a player plays an Celestial suppress, an opponent must expend a cost, a spirit. So that's a really cool idea for Celestials to take a burn deck out of. I don't know if it has quite enough tools just yet to be able to really become its own deck, but alas, it's still a novel idea that I'm excited to try out and see how much you can get out of it. It does work in tandem with Like a Void, so if you already had Pendulance, while you will only be able to cast out 2 Werepups in addition to your already Like a Void cast. This would also mean that you're burning your opponent for 2 on the turn that you do this. So again, there's a lot of things that you can combine with the Pendulance. At initial glance, they might think it's a little bit too hard to do, but when you really think of all the cards that you can use to suppress your Celestials or your opponent's Celestials, it starts to stack up. Especially with Gorgon's Gaze. I think being able to do Gorgon's Gaze, stop whatever they want to do, and also burn them for an additional spirit is a really nice combo. So I do think it has a lot of potential. Just think that we might need 1 or 2 more cards for it to be its own definitive deck. Now, I think that the most exciting out of the Artemis cards was probably Specteris, Champion of Artemis, and for good reason. It has 4 attack, 2 defense, just like its predecessor. However, what really sets this card apart is the fact that this Specteris can be special cast from your hand with a Lunar if an opponent has at least 1 suppressed card. So if they have at least 1 suppressed card, this card is basically its free special cast. And this is excellent for any suppression deck in general. Toxiri, Night Venom decks are gonna love this card. Any kind of suppression, Postamus, Necrolith, these cards are going to be buffed incredibly thanks to this. Especially Necrolith, because now you can just have a combo where you have Artemis and Specteris in hand with your Necrolith, and you can just Artemis, target an Celestial, suppress it, special cast Specteris, and then ascend directly into your Necrolith to then destroy it. I think that's going to be a really cool effect and really cool combo. But we have many other uses for Specteris. And one other really cool interaction that it has with other cards or other decks is actually the Antitan. The fact that you have another insectoid that can be special cast to the field rather easily makes it so that Antitan just feels a lot stronger now. I think that Antitan is going to be very intimidating moving forward, and I just can't wait to see what people start cooking up with. Overall, I think this card is one of the best cards revealed. it makes sense that it's a holo. I will have to get my hands on 3 copies for sure. And there's so many decks that I want to try it out. So hopefully you guys are as excited as I am, because those were all the cards that were revealed this week, at least up to yesterday. I know that Dan already posted today's new Frost cards that were revealed. I will probably cover those cards in another video, but even though we do have more cards to discuss, at the very least, I think that this chunk of cards makes anybody that was hesitant about Firestorm probably change their mind, and I think it's going to be a very exciting set. So, that being said, I will leave you guys with the question of the day, which is, what is your favorite card that was revealed this week? Was it Specteris? Was it Majesea, Sluggle? For all those Sluggle fans like me out there, please comment in the comment section below so that I get to see what's the general feedback on this set so far. I think that overall they're knocking it out of the park, and there's a lot of great stuff to look forward to, and we haven't even got into half of the set. So, that being said, that will be all from my behalf. Decent Shirt, signing out.